Hey everyone, and welcome to my World of Tanks 8.6 patch review in the test patch little preview here. Figured I'd give you guys a way to see what's all involved in the new patch and a quick little glimpse. That way if you can, or you don't have the ability to get through the patch right now, give you an ability to check it all out, see what's all there in a nice little condensed format for you. So, some new stuff that's added is a new map, the Korean map. Hopefully we get that one up during our little test feature here, but if worst comes to worst, we can always check that out in a private room. Otherwise, there's new encounter battles added to Mines, Lakeville, and Redshire, and birds have been added to Runeberg and Lakeville, for whatever that is to you. The after-battle statistics have a little more information on them now. A few other small things that really aren't too important to us. There's small improvements made to the special battle screen, which we can't really get into here because there's no tournaments or clan wars. And of course, something that's really new and nice is that all new accounts now receive a tier 1 tank with 100% crew as opposed to the starting 50%. So, let's go ahead and take a look at the one new thing that is the key here to 8.6, and that is, besides the aiming mechanic, we'll get to that, the tier 10 artillery. So as we can see here, the artillery now stretches all the way across the board, whereas it usually was cut off right here at 8. So they just, added a few tanks here and there, spliced a few things up, shifted some things over. As you can see, they split the Su-14 up into two different tanks, added a little different naming quality to the 212. It's now the 212A. I believe the Su-14 was originally there. Yeah, now they split it into two. And I believe the Su-122A is a brand new one as well. I'd have to look over here. Yes, so actually, sorry about that. The 122A and the 14-1 are the two new ones. The 14-2 is just the renamed one from the previous. And the 212A is also a renamed tank. Now, I haven't played through any of them, so I really don't know what the situation is here, but I do remember someone saying that that gun is specific to that tank. Let's take a look at some of the guns here as they go down the line. So, this one, the BR2 is actually accessible to almost all the tanks in the line from pretty much tier 6 up. You have the S51, which is the standard one, the 14-2, the 212A, and the 14-1, all having the stock gun that this thing has. It also has a 203mm, wow. And that's, of course, accessible on all of them as well. So, pretty much from right here on, it's all about the same gun. Nothing new from there. So the Germans, the one that I actually have been playing, that is up at the top here. The GW E100 is the renamed Type 100, I believe it is, or GW Type E. The Tiger hasn't been touched. The Tiger P is the new one. It's the new tank there. In addition, there's the Panzer IV artillery. That's an interesting little tank. And the Sturmpanzer II here was pushed down, as that was actually used to be over here back in line with the Bison and the Wesp. Ooh, shit, stuff really got pushed around, because yeah, the Bison used to be the tier 2. Now that's moved to a tier 3 as a split tree off of the Gerpanzer Mark IV. So that's an interesting thing. Does that make it pretty much a half-track? Well, it technically, I don't know. Cool. I'm not going to argue with it. So, some pretty cool stuff there. Of course, the gun should most likely be the same. Yep, just separated from there. And of course, the opening too many things that don't matter. That's usable through the GW Tiger P and the GW Tiger. So the Tiger P is the initial, the GW is the one after that. I might have to play around with this thing. Oh man, that looks hideous. Oh, that looks ugly as all sin. But yeah, I mean, we got some new stuff. That's actually a Tiger. That's a Panther, or not Panther, a Panzer IV with a open top turret and a howitzer on it. Cool. So other than that, we go into the Americans here. We can see that they've spread out just a little bit with the 53, 55 being the new one there, and the 44 coming off from some of the other things. So everything else remains as normal, just two new ones over on this end here. See what type of guns they get. A nice little gun here that's only accessible to this tank, so that's a first. This one has an exclusive gun. And of course the... Ooh, another exclusive gun. What do you know? So the 4043 does not have guns that are shared. So it looks like the American tanks, or SPGs, are the first ones to actually have their own sort of gun lines. So let's go ahead and take a look at the French. That one should be pretty easy. Batchat 155-55 there is separated from the 155-58. So that was split off into two different ones. And if we look, we can see that the, what is it? Right here, the AMX-13 was actually split into two tanks now. So now you have the one that was originally the Tier 5 now got shifted around a bit. So now that there's a Tier 6 one, and then the Lorraine's got pushed up one. So other than that, we take a look at the Brits. They don't have one yet. That was kind of easy going into that one. Should have known that one. And of course, the Chinese don't have one either. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the in-game mechanics before we hop in to look at the SPGs. One of the major things, of course, that I saw and was kind of happy about is now spall liners are completely different. So I used to have a heavy spall liner. All spall liners used to do an even 15 reduction. Now they've been steadily increased to go from 15 to 20 and 30 for the super heavies here. The super heavies get applied only to massive tanks like the E100, and I want to say that maybe the yes, it's based on weight then. So things like the E75, the 45, the off A here definitely get a heavy. So the heavy is 25, and as we keep working down the line, we see the Tiger 2 also gets the heavy, which is a 25. Going on to low, don't need to look at him. Let's look at the Tiger P here, and he gets a heavy as well. So we make it down to the Panther, and he gets a medium, which is at 20. And then we'll finally get to a small tank here if we can find one. This guy should get a light spall liner at 15. So you can see they're now in a tiered structure thing based upon your weight and tank type. So that's kind of cool. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of the in-game mechanics, and that is the aiming mechanic. I'll try it on two different tanks, the E100 and the very infamous BL-10 carrier, the ISU, because that one is notorious for having its shots go random. So I'll explain that as we play with the shots. As I charge into town here to show you guys what some of the new improvements to the aiming system, I'll talk about the new heat modifications, because right now I can use the 150mm high explosive anti-tank round, heat round in other words, in this tank of mine. So heat now is more likely to ricochet if it impacts on a surface that is greater than 80 degrees. So that's going to be a little more interesting, because it no longer is the instant, penetration and kill, well, not kill, but very easy penetration that it used to be. Now I just need to line up a shot here to make it work, but I think this pattern's going to get away. Otherwise, let me see about getting over here and taking a good aim. Nothing to aim at there. But anyway, so after penetration, the heat rounds can no longer ricochet within the tank. So that's great for spaced armor, such as the craziness that is the what do you want to call it? The Super Pershing. Because of its great spaced armor, it no longer can go through the first plate and then ricochet off the second, the actual hull of the tank. Instead, it now loses 5% of its penetration for every 10 centimeters it has to travel. So overall, I mean, you can really reduce the, with a high enough armor value, you now can greatly reduce the penetration rate of the heat round. And it'll be interesting to see just, what sort of effect and damage that does now. So if I take a look there, of course, going right through with the heat round. Ooh, I'm in trouble. I'm just stuck out here. Luckily, I'm able to deflect at the angle I'm at. But anyway, so after penetration, the force of the heat round actually continues to travel in through the armor as it takes into account the angle of the impact and the armor itself to make this calculation. Blah blah blah. And suspension now counts as a spaced armor when penetrated by a heat round. So anyway, we let ourselves aim in a bit, and we fire, and there you go. Nice little easy shot. So enough about the heat rounds and their little mechanics and how they work. Now let's talk about the aiming mechanic here, as I actually check a setting. So there is a setting somewhere where is dynamic camera. Alright, I'm going to have to probably look into that one later then. But there is one about your reticle when in sniper mode and how it reacts according to movement. So I'm going to have to take a peek into that one here briefly as soon as I get an opportunity, which is probably after I shoot the E4 here. Ricocheted. Okay, so aiming mechanic, Basically, if you want to take a look at it, let's just take a look at my reticle as it sits right now. Basically, well, that's really, let me zoom in all the way. Okay, so there used to be pretty much a curve to it as to where shells would land. More or less a graph curve, not saying it's going to land right like that. But more shells, like 20% would hit around the exterior here, and, you know, the other 80% would land in here at any given point in time when you're moving, when you're not. Now that's really been reduced so that it's more likely to land in the center by a good portion. So you're looking at more along the lines of a 5% hit to the exterior there, and only a smaller portion, yeah, 5% to the exterior and about a 95% to the interior. So if you want to look at it, basically they took the bell curve as to where things are going to hit and really reduced it to a much more, ooh, bounced off. They basically reduced it to a much, you know, tighter curve. And same thing with damage. They supposedly made it so that the highs and lows of the damage bell curve are actually a little bit tighter. So now it's no longer as crazy. I'm gonna get a massive hit here. Ricocheted. Man, I'm doing a lot of ricocheting. So anyway, we'll get back to that in another battle. I was able to show you kind of a mechanic there. Let's go on with the BL10 and see how that works instead. Before I move on to that though, we actually can now see here the different types of things I was talking about. They're on the detailed report. We can see the penetrating hits, the direct hits, splash damage is separate there. We can also start to see things like the hits received. We see non-penetrating, penetrating, and splash damage received. So we get sort of a better understanding as to how things work, a little bit better in terms of the hits received, hits dealt, so on and so forth. So a little bit more detail. We'll go ahead and hop in the BL10 carrier, the ISU-152, and we will take a look and talk more about the aiming and damage mechanics from there. So as I start with an SPG here, or not an SPG, a TD here, I figured I'd talk a little bit about their balance changes. But something I noticed is that if you go into the settings, the dynamic camera is the effect that makes your tank gun shake when you fire. So that is actually the new camera shake removal. So that's something to note. And of course, we're now playing in the nice Korea map here. So it's a snowy village in the mountaintops. Going to be really interesting sight lines with that said. So, some things that have changed now for TDs and SPGs is that they now earn as much credits and as much experience as the standard mediums and heavies. So it's no longer a slight bit of difference in the experience leveling that the SPGs and the TDs get. Now they're all on par, whereas before they weren't as even. They earned 50% less for the SPGs and a whole lot, 30% less for the TDs. Ooh, that's an interesting new word for bouncing. They dinged us. Anyway, so yes, the damage rate for guns now has been changed up a bit. So now that you're doing 5% less on the extreme edges. Whoa, ammo rack. So 5% less on the edges, meaning that now your extreme highs and extreme lows of the average are actually reduced by 5% chance of hitting those. So that means you're going to do slightly bit more damage just towards your average. Now you're going to do a little bit more, making it a little more even, a little more fair. So you're going to see closer to your average damage a lot more. Not necessarily a lot, but enough to make a difference and make it a little more fun, as I'm trying to avoid artillery shells here. Now, something that's also changed is that the spotting mechanic, the camo coefficiency has all been changed up ever so slightly, so that now hiding behind bushes is changed around so that it no longer is allowing tanks to go basically completely disappearing in the open, especially with TDs. Now it's a little bit different of a rate. Things don't get quite as crazy. And the all-important thing is that now everything stacks in a different fashion, as I get killed by artillery. So we'll continue talking about this in another battle. As I take another TD into battle here and slowly charge at a T-54, which is probably a bad idea. But anyway, as I was saying, the aiming mechanic for the game actually is now much greatly better, so on and so forth, improved. Now it will only reach the exterior of the reticle here on about a 5% chance, a 20% reduction. So that means your shots are going to be a little more accurate, especially on the move. This is the case for all tanks except SPGs. That has to maintain the same. So now your shots are going to land more in the center of the reticle, a little more consistently. So now you're going to no longer get those crazy random shots that wind out in the middle of nowhere, which generally didn't make sense when they occurred. But now you're going to get less of that shanking, a little more accurate shots, just a better overall feel for the tank. So it's going to really improve your aiming, especially if you're on the move, trying to do snapshots. It's going to be a lot more interesting and a lot more fun. And of course I tried to snapshot there and that just didn't work at all. So as I'm stuck there. But there you have it. So that little interesting mechanic will make a big difference in the game. It certainly will for me, because I notice that a lot of times my placed shots do shank a little to the sides, but now that really does help that they're changed up. So otherwise, beyond that, the ACPR and ARCP shells, like this one that I can carry right here, the APCRs, that are the black stripes with the crazy looking look for the premiums, have been changed so that they're decreased from a 5 to a 2 degree normalization. So while I'm not familiar with the normalization mechanics and the mathematics behind it, that does mean that they're not severely as I don't even know how to properly word it, but basically it means that they've been toned down a little bit more, just so that they're not as instant penetration and overpowering as they used to be. So as I line up my shot on this guy, we can see there you can actually pull out snapshots a little bit quicker, a little bit easier, whereas before I really needed to wait, make sure I was lined up, because I was afraid that my shot would go out to that exterior. So you can actually take a little bit of quicker shot now, because you're more confident in the fact that it's going to hit closer to the center and not go to those edges. So now you can frame your target as opposed to having to wait for it to completely center on a target, meaning that as long as the tank is in that reticle, they'll be fine, as opposed to waiting for the reticle to collapse on a tank. Now, beyond that, there really isn't too much more in terms of crazy sauce stuff. See, now I no longer have to wait for it to come in. I can snapshot it a little quicker, a little easier. So besides the damage and the aiming, the increased damage or increased experience and money earning for SPGs and TDs, I think it's actually just increased experience. I don't believe it's actually credits, so that is a mistake on my end. The actually tracking people with damage, or tracking people, those nasty little zero damage tracks that everyone's used to doing all the time, those will actually start to earn you stuff. Those will earn you experience now, instead of just a random hit that, normally didn't do squat. Now it actually earns you experience, you get stuff for it. It's no longer kind of a disappointment. You are still going to get stuff off it. Yeah, you're not going to get the kill and you're not going to do damage, but it still is considered part of the game now in terms of any sort of a increase in your experience earning for the battle. So hopefully that takes care of that little bit of tidbits for the mechanical changes. Let's go take a look at the SPGs and talk about how they've been rebalanced a little interestingly. So we'll take a look at those next. So I've covered a lot about all the different little mechanics here and there, and I figured now would be the time in which I touch upon the major point of this patch, which is the artillery, the Tier 10 SPGs, and all the little nuances. So, to begin with, there are a bunch of new SPGs, and I'm going to be showing them in the clips that scroll by here while I'm talking, and I'm only going to be showing the new ones. So, the Soviets, the USSR, get a new Tier 5 and a new Tier 7 SPGs, the Su-122A, which is basically an Su-76 with a 122mm strapped on it, and then the Su-14 TAC-1, which is the, basically it's the Su-14 you're commonly used to at the current, but it doesn't have that top portion removed, so it's basically the artillery less the armor. Anyway, the German line actually gets 3, it's the only one that gets 3, and now they have a Panzer Mark IV. It's a very low tier 2, it's a speedy little demon, but it's still pretty cool. And on top of that, there's the Panzer IV with a 105 strapped onto it in an artillery fashion as opposed to just straight out the front. That one's actually very fantastically mobile, great at derping, and also, I mean, the simple fact that it has a very good turret rotation. You'll notice that a lot of these actually have great turret rotation, something like a good 45 degrees on the front for a lot of good tanks here. And then, of course, the GW Tiger P, which is very similar looking to basically the Ferdinand. You just lop off that top part and strap on the gigantic artillery cannon, and there you go. That's what you get. So beyond that, we look at the Americans. You got the T-44, which is, you know, nothing fancy there. It's just another straight-ahead shooter. And then, of course, the what is this? The M53-55, which is a very awesome little tank. Simply in the fact that it has great turret rotation, it's fast, it is massive, but it has a massive 8-inch cannon on it, which is just devastating when it hits. In addition to that, we get the French, which have the new AMX 50, or no, it's 105 AM MLE 47, which is at a tier 5, and then the tier 9 Batchat, which is a basically a single shot Batchat. Now, there's been a little bit of reorganization and a lot of renaming of different artillery pieces. The most important one that you'll notice is that the, as I said earlier, the Sturmpanzer 1, the Bison, was moved up to be in line with the Wesp, and of course the Grill was moved up to be a tier 5, and then the Hummel moved up to a 6, etc., etc. So, from there, the other one is the Americans. You'll notice that the Priest and the M37 actually were swapped. It doesn't say that on the actual test patch notes, but in the tech tree, they were swapped. So that the Priest is now tier 3, and the M37 is a nice little tier 4. And that actually follows more of a historical route. So that makes a little more sense historically. And of course, they swapped their stats. There might be a few others I'm missing, but of course, for any more detailed information, certainly go and check out the test server itself, or check out the post. I'll post that link in the description from the World of Tanks website for the news for the patch notes. Now, some important things about the SPGs is they've actually had quite a little bit of rebalancing that makes it almost a new type of thing here. First and foremost, all the SPGs now can fight to the top tier at which they're allotted. So a tier 9 SPG can top out a tier 9 battle, a tier 5 SPG can top out a tier 5 battle. There's no more of that 2+1 sort of matchmaking that you're used to. So now they get the standard matchmaking that every other tank gets, and that's simply because they've all been rebalanced and shifted around with their damage and everything else. So what does all that balancing out and everything do? Well, first and foremost, their reload time for the SPGs have been increased by 10 to 20% per SPG. So it's no longer as rapid as you were used to. It takes a lot longer, and of course that goes into the fact that now the travel time has been changed, so that's 10 to 15% different, and up to 50% for the mortars. So it's going to take a lot longer for that shell to reach its location when, you know, it used to be quite a straight laser beam shot. That, you know, it's a major change, and a lot of it is going to be getting used to that sort of circumstance that not a lot of people are going to be ready for. So it's going to really change that up. In addition, the accuracy, which is the circle for the SPGs, has been increased significantly. I saw basically on average it was up to about, I'd say, a 0.8, give or take, 0.8, 0.9, 0.7, somewhere in there. So it is massive. But the dispersion has changed. So while you have a larger radius in which the shell can hit in, it's actually going to hit more likely, and I'm using air quotes there, more likely towards the center in varying degrees. So obviously, you know, that's going to be a bell curve coming all the way into the center as to where things should land. And of course, the shells have been changed around as well. The penetration rates have been decreased on a few. The damage themselves have been slightly shifted, nothing major, but you'll also start to see that the explosion radius does more damage, and that's what I mean by the damage has been swapped around, is that now you're doing a slightly better percentile damage on the exterior of that splash zone versus when it used to be a very sharp drop off from the direct hit out. Now it's going to be slightly more curved out, so you're no longer going to get those the splash for no damages, which were all too common. You'll still see some, but not nearly as bad as they used to. So that about covers it. A lot of people are saying that the SPGs are taking a major nerf, but in reality they really aren't. They're just forcing players to learn a new play style for them, because they were a little bit finger of God-like in the past, and now they're going to be brought a little more in balance with everything else. So it's not going to be so nearly as devastating as it used to be, but now it's going to be, like I said, it's going to require a nice learning curve. You're going to have to relearn how to play them properly. It's not going to be too bad, though. Of course, give it a month or so, and everyone's going to be back to normal with them, and it should be alright. So, I hope you all had a good time looking at this preview here. If you guys have any questions on it, feel free to either ask here. Definitely check out the news announcement in the World of Tanks webpage. And, of course, feel free to download the test server yourself and give it a run. And that's pretty much the best way to take a look at it. Hopefully you've got a nice preview here, and I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I will catch you in another video.